chaos. Um, it is a very, very different session from any of my prior 14 sessions. Um, that is what it is. We're getting, I'm still continuing to get good results for clients and whatnot, but it takes 3 times as much work. And that, again, is what it is. The thing I'll start with is talking about the budget. Now, it doesn't directly or substantially impact TCSD and its members, except on one front, which we'll talk about in a minute. But on the whole, 2 years ago, the state legislature decided, well, things are so great right now, we're going to cut state sales tax from 4.5 to 4.2%. But to make that happen, they put a sunset on there and said, if you said in 2027, this will go away and we'll go back up to 4.5%. Well, that's one issue that has caused diminished revenues. Another, of course, is just the economy of the United States. Inflation rising, buyer appetite dwindling somewhat, South Dakota GDP going down a little bit. But by and large, this last week, they adopted revenue projections that were not great. So the big three, state employees, healthcare providers, and schools, under Governor Noem's proposed budget in December, we're supposed to get increases of 1.25%, which is below inflation. Now, we're being told that those groups will be lucky to get a 0% increase. So, not great. How does that impact TCSD? Well, that brings us first to House Bills 1138 and 1191. For the last couple of weeks after these bills would repeal the sales tax exemption that has been in place for decades for advertising services. That, like many, many ag sales tax exemptions, that's always been viewed as, advertising goes into the cost of producing and attracting business, generating products and services. So therefore, we're not going to charge sales tax on those, just like fertilizer for ag. These bills have been introduced because they're trying to generate any kind of revenue possible, and it is a way for the supporters of the concept to vote in favor of it and generate additional revenue, but it doesn't look directly like they've raised taxes. So they can keep to their pledges to never raise taxes, but really they're raising taxes. But in their own minds, they're not. So when you have dismal revenues coming into the state, people start looking for anywhere they can to generate revenue. And one of those this year is these two bills here, which would repeal that tax exemption. Now, for the last 2 weeks, I've believed and talked to a number of my fellow lobbyists who also oppose this concept. We have believed that bills like 1138 and 1191 would fade away once Governor Roden rolled out his global proposal for addressing property taxes and property tax relief. Well, he's now done that. So if you want to go look at it, you can go to Senate Bill 216 and look at the amendment that is pending there. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'll be honest with you, I'm not a property tax guru. But essentially what Governor Roden's proposal is, among other things, the major part of it is that for 2027 through 2031, the total assessed value of property in the county with an owner-occupied single-family dwelling classification cannot increase in valuation more than 3% over the prior year. So this is designed to hold in place the property tax valuations, which is one of the big things that residential property owners have been complaining about the last several years. We hoped that a proposal like this would mean that 1138, 1191 might just fade away. That's not the case. And so this is the reason why I'm starting with these two bills. It's going to be all hands on deck. According to Majority Leader Odenbach, according to Senator Randy Dybert, also from the Hills, according to Senator Taffy Howard, There's a lot of appetite to find revenue where they can, and this is one of the main targets that they're looking at, to repeal the sales tax exemption for advertising services. Taffy Howard has claimed that actually Governor Roden is supportive of the concept behind the scenes. She's claimed, oh, he'll sign that if it gets to his desk. We don't know how true that is or not, but we do know that they're probably going to keep at least 1191 alive. Senator Dybert is receptive to the concept, which is why we believe he's going to what's called hog house, meaning delete and replace entirely Senate Bill 121, which is his bill that was designed to deal with us, provide some property tax relief. That bill is in Senate State Affairs. I'm sorry, Senate Tax. So Senate Tax meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I believe, yep, their Wednesday agenda has been posted, and Senate Bill 121 is not on that agenda. So Friday is probably the day they will take up Senate Bill 121, and Senator Dybert will propose an amendment to repeal the sales tax exemption on advertising services. So we're going to be fighting a three-front war: 1138, 1191, Senate Bill 121.
Yeah, and 1138 and 1191 have not been scheduled for anything yet that I've
That
seen.
is correct.
Okay.
Yep. We think because crossover day is Monday, a week from today, let me make sure that's the case, the 24th. Of course, now my internet is slow. Yes, Monday the 24th is crossover day. I'm sorry, Tuesday the 25th. Monday the 24th is the last day to move bills from the first committee to the floor. Crossover day the 25th is the last day that bills or resolutions must pass the House of Origin. So more than likely, 1138, 1191, Senate Bill 121 will be scheduled this Friday, the 21st. In the meantime, I am encouraging all members of TCSD to be contacting members of the House State Affairs Committee and the Senate State Affairs Committee to encourage them to please vote no on these bills. I can tell you that TCSD is one of 4 of my clients alone that is opposing this legislation. Wall Drug, the Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce, TCSD, and there's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head. The point is, these are bad bills. The broadcasters, the retailers, the state chamber, a number of other organizations are all going to oppose this bill. This is probably the most serious this fight has been in the last 20 years. So it's, again, all hands on deck. Any questions on the ad tax exemption before I move on to other bills?
I have a question. These bills all seem to be targeted to relieving property tax on residential.
Mhm.
My businesses don't like that. How do we get the word, commercial added?
We're not going to be able to.
Okay.
There is no appetite to provide any tax relief to commercial or ag. In fact, a lot of the concepts that have been circulating arguably shift the tax burden from residential to commercial and ag. So I agree with you. This is why including House Bill 1019, which is on our list and is almost certainly going to die, from the beginning of session, the chambers of commerce, the business groups have not taken a position on the property tax bills because we sit back and we say, commercial's not getting any benefit from this. It's only going to help residential. Yes, a lot of our business leaders have residential property, but how can we as business groups support something that A, doesn't provide us any relief, and B, probably shifts the burden to us?
Right.
But these legislators, and I understand why, are being pounded back home in their districts by homeowners who are saying, I'm going to be taxed out of my property. Now, for most residential property owners, that's not true. But there are some concepts that are being baked into Governor Roden's proposal that will try and give relief for people on fixed incomes or, things like that to help support that.
Okay, I can't find my Post-it note, unfortunately, but somewhere on this desk is the statement about the property tax increase at a campground for the residential portion versus the campground portion, and the astronomical leap it's made in the last 3 years is shocking.
Unfortunately,
Yep.
there's no appetite to help out commercial or ag this year. Let me make one other point here. Feel free to use this when you are arguing against 1138, 1191, and 121. The Department of Revenue estimates that if the sales tax exemption for advertising services is repealed, it will generate an additional $40 million of revenue for the state. Okay. If we do some pretty simple math, that means that in the state of South Dakota only, we have GDP of $1 billion on the advertising industry. The newspapers, one of my other clients, have basically said, if that's the case, every newspaper editor in the state should be on a beach somewhere instead of fighting to make ends meet. We don't understand how Department of Revenue comes up with $40 million would be generated by this. It seems ludicrous, but it is what it is. So feel free to use that. I don't know where they're getting that math from, especially since only a few years ago, their estimate was 19 million would be generated. So we don't know how in only a few years it jumped from 19 to $40 million. We also, it's a huge problem that we are going to be imposing a sales tax on freedom of speech, on political advertising. Now, for those of us who get all those postcards and mailers and direct advertising on Facebook and everything else, maybe we think to ourselves, yeah, we should put some sales tax on that. But there's also something to be said for, again, why are we going to tax the exercise of free speech with advertising? So anything else on ad tax exemption?
I'll just echo what you said, Justin. I help with our local newspaper, and there's it's hard in small newspapers. It actually will affect the small town newspapers. I did want to ask on it. I'd asked in maybe when we met last time, where is the point of sale on those ads? Is it actually in the small towns where the newspaper would be? Do you know that yet, or are they just not clear on how that would work?
It's totally unclear yet. The question's been asked. Almost certainly, however, it's going to be counted as the point of sale. It's going to be counted as when you contract with the Mitchell Daily Republic to put an ad in the paper, when you contract with Lamar Outdoor Advertising at their offices in Rapid City, that's going to be the point of sale.
Yep.
So whatever Mitchell's sales tax would also apply on top of the state sales tax. Sioux Falls Argus Leader, Dakota Scout, it's going to be Sioux Falls, 6.2% sales tax instead of 4.2%.
Thank you. I assume that would be the case, but just wanting to clarify.
No,
Yeah,
good question.
One other question on that, if I can ask, will that also apply to any magazine that's selling advertising in
Yes.
South Dakota?
Yep.
So for example, like the State Vacation Guide, all those
Yep.
publications as well?
Yes.
Okay, I assume that, but I just wanted to ask for
Yep.
clarification. Okay, thank you.
Magazines, newspapers, broadcasting, and social media advertising. Other questions, comments? All right. For now, we can go back to the monitoring list, and I'll go to supporting. House Bill 1189 is one of the 3 airport bills that's out there. I forwarded Carmen a screenshot of a post from Representative Aaron Aylward. Representative Aylward from Harrisburg was the legislator in the House who pulled 1189 from the consent calendar to be voted on by the full House. And then, even though that bill came out of the House Appropriations Committee unanimously and was on the consent agenda, it was pulled off consent, and it only passed the floor by a vote of 45 to 24. So 24 legislators voted against House Bill 1189. This is the bill that extends by 2 years the deadline for using these marketing funds for airport terminal expansion and whatnot, before those funds revert to the general fund. Really not a controversial bill. However, I'll just, call them what they would probably call themselves. The House far right voted in a block against this bill. I forwarded to Carmen this post from Representative Aylward strongly objecting to Senate Bill
32.
132, thank you. There's so many numbers. 132 is the $30 million appropriation for the airports. So as a block, the far right in both chambers of the legislature is saying they will not, under any circumstances, support a budget that includes this $30 million. More than likely, this means they will not vote for something that includes even $1 of appropriation for the airports. So what does that tell us? Well, you need 47 in the House to get a supermajority, to vote, to pass a spending measure. Currently, there's 24 solid no's against 1189, which tells us that more than likely it's going to be extremely difficult for 132 to pass through the House. As a block, these folks are voting no on the airport bills. Now, hopefully we, at a minimum, get 1189 because it doesn't require a 2/3 majority to pass. But getting 132 and
What's the other one? I can't remember the number.
178.
209 and 178. Yes, 178. Carmen, you can update your list. 209 and 184 have been withdrawn. The airport registration bills are not going to be a thing this year. Senator Joy Hone, who was supposed to be the prime, changed her mind for some reason and decided I will prime sponsor the increase to the jet fuel tax, but I will not sponsor a bill to increase the registration fees for aircraft. So 184 and 209 are not going to happen this year. We're looking at 132, 178, and 1189. I think we're pretty safe on 1189. 132, I mean, we'll work very hard, but I don't see a realistic path forward if that block of legislators is just as an immovable unit going to vote against it under any circumstances. 178 does not have its, I think it's been scheduled for hearing on Wednesday, excuse me, in Senate taxation. We'll just have to see what happens at that time. We're working on it, working hard on it, but I just wanted this group to understand, because I think Carmen and I were both shocked when a block of 24 House members voted no on 1189, really without any explanation. I forwarded the Facebook post to Carmen so that, and I told her, this, I think, is what's going on. As a block, these folks are all going to vote no on these airport bills to send a message that we don't want the $30 million appropriation, and we think that it's unfair in a year when we're so tight on budget to be putting money toward airports.
And I think, when we talk to our representatives and our senators and stuff, I mean, we really have to push this as an investment as opposed to, an expense. And, that return on that investment, I don't know, Megan, maybe, or Jennifer, is Megan on the call? Yeah, Megan, I mean, do you guys have like the state of, tourism has, where you spend $1, you get this much in return? Do you have any kind of numbers for that?
Yeah, we do. I know we're talking about our economic impact numbers at 456 million. I've got a handout that I can forward to you, Carmen, that's got that return on investment.
Is that on
But
your
it's-
website?
I believe so.
I
It's
think
more,
I've seen it then, yeah.
yeah, it's actually, we looked at more what the federal reinvestment is for every state dollar. That's the stat I have.
Okay. I'll look it up. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to say this. We had the hearing on 132 in the Joint Appropriations Committee last week. Last week, anyway. I cannot tell you enough how fantastic the Rapid City and Sioux Falls Airport representatives did. They just did an amazing job. They had all kinds of fantastic data and information, you know, but ultimately, we're just going to have to see what happens.
And there were, the only opposition that was in that was from the Bureau of Finance and Management, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Did we learn anything from the questions that were asked during that hearing that would be helpful for us when we're talking to other legislators about it? I'd listened in on the hearing too, and it just sounded like there was really good information that was presented. And so maybe it's those points that were asked about that we keep echoing to the other legislators when we talk to them.
Yeah, I kind of gathered that they were interested in what's this going to be for passenger safety. That seemed to be something that they keyed in on.
I'll listen to it again, Anne, and try to pull some stuff out of it. So
Yeah, it was a fantastic hearing. I thought all of the proponents did an amazing job. But we can't escape the reality of the dismal revenues.
yeah.
Okay, anything else on airports? Otherwise, just want to reemphasize, I am going to continue to work aggressively in the halls of the Capitol, whatever help individual members of TCSD can provide by way of emailing members of the Senate and the House would be appreciated.
Yeah, we'll get another alert out there, Justin.
All right. Okay. So we have talked about the airport bills. Talked about the two sales tax bills. Let's talk, if we could, about, first of all, House Bill 1154. This bill, one of the lines you hear over and over again in the legislature is this bill is not ready for prime time. House Bill 1154 is the perfect example. This bill was not ready for prime time when it was first introduced. It is not ready for prime time now. The bill has been changed so much that, frankly, a lot of the legislators don't understand what it does anymore. It passed by one vote out of the House. So Mary and I worked it hard, probably other people from TCSD, and it got one vote more than it needed to pass out of the House. So now it's over in the Senate Local Government Committee. The bill is, if the bill does what the prime sponsor said it does now that it's been amended, it's unnecessary. But I don't think it does what the prime sponsor is claiming it does. And so I think the bill is hostile. I'm going to turn it over to Mary to talk from the Campground Owners Association in more detail.
Well, gee, put me on the spot there. I didn't know I was giving a report. Basically, we oppose this bill because it permits a municipal campground or a municipality to build or expand a campground. Our objection originally was the percentage of power per campground, but basically now what it's the last amendment I saw, it allows, let's say you have 40 tent sites at that designated municipal campground. That campground can turn around without permission from anybody in the private sector and put in 40 cabins. Now immediately what happened in the city of Mitchell, as soon as the hotels found out that a municipal campground wanted to put in cabins, they immediately jumped on the fact that that now competes with their hotel rooms. If you take a piece of land that is, no matter how it's designed, and you modify what's on each of those campsites, you are changing the dynamics. You're competing with a different audience. And so, however the campground is today is how it needs to stay, unless they go before the private sector and seek the permission that the law currently requires, and not only currently requires, but has required for decades.
So in other words, bad bill, and we're going to work hard against it, but any help that members of TCSD can provide, especially in emailing members of the Senate Local Government Committee, would be helpful. I'm going to post into the chat the link to that committee so that you can see the membership. I can tell you it's not a great committee for us. There's a lot of people on this committee who tend to be pro-municipal league, which is supportive of the bill. So Helene Duhamel from Rapid City, Tim Reed in particular. Tim's a great guy, personal friend, but definitely very much a fan of the municipal league. Former mayor of Brookings, yes. Michael Roll from Aberdeen, not our friend. Kyle Shanefish, Jamie Smith, David Wheeler. These are, I mean, the whole committee is not great for us, but the more that TCSD and SDCOA bombard this committee with emails talking about the incredible number of problems that it has, the better. Now, Mary, is the Hotel and Hospitality Association formally opposing this bill?
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
I would also add that, interestingly, Senator Reed was one of my staunchest supporters several years ago when this bill was heard. And I went up to him afterward and thanked him for his vote and said, how do we prevent this from happening? Can we do, I don't know, a summer study to figure out how to make this law better with all parties at the table? And he said, nope, don't touch that. Don't even open that door, because as soon as you open the door, you open it for all sorts of wild and crazy things. He says, I want you to stay your ground forever and a day. Do not support any of this. And of course, you just said he's for it. and I knew that all along. Yeah.
Let me say this. I have not talked to the individual members of the Senate Local Government Committee yet. My point is the folks that I listed tend to be staunch allies of the Municipal League. And because the Municipal League supports, that's my concern. Now, given the two only sponsors of House Bill 1154, this is a Mitchell issue. Representative Bathke, Senator Miskimmons, this is a Mitchell problem. And they're trying to force on the whole state a solution for a problem that may or may not exist only in Mitchell. So that should be one of the arguments that we make in opposition to this bill.
Yeah.
I have also found success in making the argument, ladies and gentlemen, this statute has been on the books for 135 years. It's been on the books in its current form for 35 years. At the end of the day, you are changing the rules midstream to suit one community, which is claiming it has a problem. That resonates.
I also will be bringing up my, when we fought this bill some years ago, we were battling against a senator who spewed a lot of what I will blatantly call lies, but I suppose publicly I should say misinformation. But I had a 15-minute presentation, 16 minutes maybe, because it was so packed with lies that misinformation that I had to fix. So you hit upon some of that, but I will be addressing a lot of those again, just in case, because that individual is still in the legislature. So who knows what's happening.
My guess is that's the legislator who tried to amend it again.
Yep.
On the House floor.
Right. Died really quickly.
Yep. So, okay.
Thank you.
House Bill 1215. This is trying to put in place a slew of new regulations, fees, and other requirements on fishing and hunting guides. Unclear where this came from. It's my understanding it did not come from GF&P, but GF&P would be the regulator that would have to enforce all of this stuff. So frankly, that's one reason why, in my opinion, GF&P should oppose it. I don't know if we know where GF&P formally or officially stands on the bill, but it's a very troubling piece of legislation. We were hopeful that the prime sponsor was going to withdraw it, and unfortunately now it appears that it's going to go forward. There is an amendment posted to the bill that has not yet been adopted, and it is up for hearing tomorrow morning at 7:45 before the House House Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Representative DeGroote's got an amendment out there which really doesn't change the bill and certainly doesn't make it better. So I'm going to turn it over to Carmen and the rest of the group for insights, comments, the best arguments we can use on this. Carmen sent me a fantastic 2-page document that has a long list of concerns coming from Northeastern Region Outfitters, Walleye Guys, and Missouri River Outfitter. I think these are fantastic arguments against the bill. I don't know what we're hearing from the committee members in House Ag on where they're going to stand on it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from the committee members either, Justin, but I've been hearing a lot from the outfitters. And thank you to the regions for all sending that out to your outfitters, because I've been hearing quite a bit back from them. They are not happy. They are activated. They are reaching out to the different individuals on that committee that'll be hearing it tomorrow. I've got some that have asked me to put their stuff in front of them for them because they don't have time. So where GF&P stands on this, I have just gotten it on good authority without naming names that they have talked to different outfitters, and some of these outfitters, they want regulations, but they just don't feel this is the way it should be done. And so I don't know if they've gotten word from the top down to stay away from this issue or what the deal is, but I think they tried to kill it. And I think that's why instead of being pulled, it came back. So that's what I know about it. Rosie, do you have anything from your group?
We've got several outfitters that have made contacts. We talked about it at our board meeting here, not about a week and a half ago. Most of the lodges are already insured, and pay their taxes, pay their fees and all that. The conflict comes in if you have, just a few guys that do it, let's say like 6 weekends out of the year, and they work for different full-time lodges, right? I need help this weekend. So their concern is having to turn people away for trips, because they don't have enough people out in the field and staff out in the field with them. So an effect on tourism overall and their business personally. So the tourism dollars. I did talk to one individual in La Crosse that's on both sides and of the story. And basically they'd have to turn people away. They wouldn't have enough part-time guides. I did talk to someone who was formerly in the South Dakota Wildlife Federation here last week. And he has since stepped away from that, but feels that it's not the right bill and it'll probably not pass this year, but it's not going to go away. So, a summer study might be interesting way to deal with that, but just the way it's vague, it was written vaguely for a reason that then GF&P Commission could set the guidelines and the rules and with game fishing parks, but it's just too vague to actually pass through. And so, but it's not going away. It's going to come back around.
You bring up a good point, because I did hear from one of the commissioners and they're like, we don't want to monitor this. We don't have the time, nor do we have the expertise. And so, by putting the commissioners in there kind of changes the tone of it. The way it's written makes it sound like it is a game fish and parks bill. Yeah, most of them that I've talked to have said the same thing. They have to hire out of state guides to help them during their busy season. If they are not allowed to do that, that becomes a real issue as well. So, and you talked to a couple too that are in your area, right?
Yeah, I have. And then it's the mixed message that I think is making it hard. Like Rosie has said, it's not going away, but nobody can decide what they want. Like there's within the industry, the lodges have it's just competing interests. Like, I hear some people say good that it's out of state. I honestly, or that it limits out of state. And I think that's one of the worst things about this because so much of our, hunting and fishing, like our border waters and our Missouri River, all of that kind of stuff is a big issue for guides being able to be part of the industry here in South Dakota. So I don't, I generally, I mean, I think this is bad and I've contacted, and I know a few other people have too, but that, that competing interest amongst the industry itself seems to be muddying the message a little bit, from my understanding at least. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm being clear.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Carmen.
I guess something that came out in one of the bills, I think it was the waterfowl bill. Justin, I don't know if you were listening to that one when the House was talking about it last week, Friday. There were a couple of representatives, and I think Representative Colbeck was one of them, who, when they were opposed to this, allowing the waterfowl piece for National Guards people or active duty, they came right out and said, we don't want these people coming and fishing or hunting our waterfowl. So there's this very territorial piece too, of some of our sportsmen that live in the state, I believe, versus people coming in and, from out of state and doing hunting. So, there's that kind of message that's in there as well. And so I'm not sure what we do with that because, that's kind of a big issue, but it's a quiet under the surface boiling issue, the way it sounds, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I remember
Well,
the
I don't think it's
from 10 years
underground. I
ago.
think, yeah, your waterfall
Okay.
association's pretty
Okay.
active, and they'll be at every commission meeting forever. But the other piece that I heard, which is interesting, where this kind of originated from, is when you get someone. There's been, and maybe Justin has a take on this, but your actual landowners in the state, where their lobbying is at, because what I've heard too is that it takes like two bad guides, right, to create momentum for this. And he talked about landowners that they had an out of state guy that wasn't working for anybody else, just working for himself. Go, hey, can I, hunt your land today? And suddenly the landowner comes out, of his farmhouse a while later, and there's 10 guides or 10 guys in the field with guns, and he's charging them X amount of dollars per gun per bird. And the landowners didn't ask for money. He was just being nice to an out of state, didn't realize he was a guide. And so some of it's coming from that as well. So it takes like, two bad guide service businesses or three, whatever, to then create this momentum, like something's got to be regulated here
Right.
because the landowner is getting shortchanged, and somebody's breaking the, to them, they're breaking the law, right? To use that. And maybe Justin has an idea of what, if it's coming from that too, I don't know, but that's the story I heard as well last week.
Interesting. The preserve part of it too, I've heard a couple people say, well, that doesn't apply because we have a preserve. So then you have that whole section that's not involved because they don't think that this is ever going to apply to them. So I think that it's, I think maybe part of our message, and Carmen, I'll let you craft this, but is that the industry knows that something needs to happen. This bill isn't it.
Couple of questions here first. Do any other states that we know of license or regulate guides or outfitters?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. And the next question would be, assuming that there are other states that regulate outfitters and guides, do any of them just flat ban out of state guides? That seems extreme to me. And then here's one of the biggest arguments that I'm going to make with the members of the Ag Committee, and I know it's going to resonate, excuse me, with the following people: Julie Auk, Tim Goodwin, Spencer Gosh, Jenna Hunt, Travis Ismay, Trish Ladner, Kaylee Knowles, Marty Overweg, Kathy Rice, Kevin Van Diepen. With those folks in particular, and probably Richard Dasgard, this bill is one of the most, how to put this gently, oversimplified bills like this that I've ever seen. Normally, when you are going to impose a licensure requirement onto a brand new profession or occupation, the bill is fairly extensive because the legislature does not like, particularly the people I named, that block of legislators, they do not like just handing sweeping rulemaking authority over to GF&P. Unbridled, except in the list of things we've got here. Normally, and you look at the chapters of our code that license a profession or an occupation, they've got usually around somewhere between 7 to 15 statutes that the legislature puts in and says, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's the specific requirements that we want, and then you leave a narrow amount of rulemaking authority to the agency that's going to regulate that. This is just complete unbridled. It's one statute, and all it does is it says, we want to license and regulate hunting and fishing guides and outfitters. But we don't want to have to decide how to do that. So we're just going to put it all on GF&P and give them total unbridled control over all of these issues. I just think the members of this committee, the members of our legislature, they're going to look at that and say, yeah, this is clearly not ready for prime time if anything ever has been.
Justin, I want to make a quick Google search says, yes, Minnesota, Nebraska, and North Dakota have some sort of licensure. That's a super quick Google search.
And
I will say that there is one consistent point now that you bring it up. That, and it's not everybody said it as a comment when I've discussed it with them. They do feel like GF&P sometimes has, I'll use the term one guy said, extra legal authority to come into your space and, do searches and that kind of stuff. So maybe that is one argument that would really resonate, because that seems to be something that has come up a lot, from taxidermists to the fishing guides to the lodges. I mean, everybody seems to think GF&P can get in. So this gives them more authority to do so, maybe.
I added a link called
Overrate.
gohunt.com where it talks about a number of states.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies. So I think the more that we contact the members of the House Ag Committee to tell them this is a problem. If you truly think that there is a need to regulate and license hunting and fishing guides and outfitters, if you think there's a need and you want to license and regulate, this ain't the bill. This is just, hey, GF&P, we've decided that we want to license and regulate. You figure it all out. So that's a huge problem. Okay. Anything else on that bill? Okay. So everything else we are either just monitoring or we are neutral on. But I do want to ask if there's any bills in that list that folks would like to talk about. Again, 1019, that's probably going to go away. I know there was some heartburn among some people out in the Black Hills about Senate Bill 79, the Class 1 electric bikes and the Mickelson Trail. That still passed out of the Senate pretty handily, and it's now awaiting its first hearing over in the House. But it doesn't sound like there's that kind of heartburn among TCSD members at this point. And there must not be much concern among the members of the legislature. A lot of the bills that are on our list are, for the most part, spender bills, or changing, for example, the authority that GF&P has. So it's interesting. We've got Senate Bill 144 and 153 on one side, which really tries to ratchet down GF&P. And then on the other side, we've got House Bill 1215, which seems to just give unbridled power to GF&P. Now, knowing what we all know about the makeup of the legislature, 144 and 153 are coming from the far right, and 1215 is coming more from a moderate legislator, moderate Republican, moderate. Representative DeGroot. So, I don't think that most of the members of the House Ag Committee are going to take kindly to 1215. And I'm going to talk to some of them between now and tomorrow morning at the hearing, and we'll just keep working on this. Let's see. So Senate Bill 214 is one that I'll talk about real quick. This goes to exactly what we were talking about earlier with the revenues. This is scheduled for hearing Thursday morning in Senate Appropriations. This is the bill that would strike the 2027 sunset on the cut to sales tax from 4.5 to 4.2. This bill is coming from Senator Carr. My guess is that this bill is going to die because the legislature is going to say we are in the midst of some pretty bad revenue times and we want to keep our options open going forward. Senate Bill 213 is another bill that I just don't think is going to go anywhere. This bill coming from Senator Red Dawn Foster is saying if you can show that your food product is grown, raised, or otherwise produced exclusively in South Dakota, you can apply for an exemption from sales tax. This is more, given the sponsors, this is getting at wanting to do something to repeal the sales tax on groceries. It's a nibble. It's, camel's nose under the tent. But I, again, don't think it's going to go anywhere. First of all, it'd be very difficult to prove. It'd be very difficult to regulate. Secondly, it's going to eat into the revenues that are coming to the state of South Dakota. So my guess is this is not going to go anywhere this year. It's up for its first hearing in Senate tax on Wednesday. It sounds like a great thing, which is why I put it on our list because, hey, we've got lots of South Dakota businesses who want to sell, distilled vintage spirits that are produced here in South Dakota or South Dakota brewed beers or something like that. But when you peek behind the curtain and figure out what the bill is really trying to do, I just don't think a lot of our members are going to want to have to do jump through all the hoops in order to get that exemption. What have I not talked about, or what have I talked about that we'd like to discuss in more detail?
Can you clarify SB 200 a little bit? We had quite a bit of a conversation on that with the vintage distillery. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. If it's something that you can't buy anymore, but it's on premise sales, like at a restaurant or whatever, I'm not understanding why the bill is really even there. I mean, it seems like if you've got an old bottle of whiskey that you want to sell to your customers, you should be able to. Unless I'm missing something in that bill. Michelle, you had some comments about that one when we talked about it a little bit, but it's like, yeah, it's
So in my mind, reading through the bill, this is designed to allow you to sell vintage distilled spirits as long as they're not over a certain quantity, even if you don't have a specific license to be able to do so. You can get a specific vintage distilled spirits license.
oh,
Is
so
what
it
the
is a
bill says.
licensing thing. Okay.
Yes. So in other words, currently you can't sell these kinds of spirits just willy-nilly. This would say if you apply for a license that is specific to these, as you said, no longer sold distilled spirits, then you can sell it with that special license and you're not necessarily going to have to go through all of the rigmarole to get, a local beer wine.
Is is it a workaround then for a
Is that-
distillery that's a local distillery? Then they don't have to get a liquor license to sell on site? Like, I'm trying to figure out the scenario where this is.
Right, because vintage to me sounds like,
What's the reason? Who is it? Is it Reed, Senator Reed? Is he the sponsor? Is that what I'm
Yep.
seeing? Yeah.
So I can call and talk to him, but if you look at section 1 of the bill, for purposes of this chapter, vintage distilled spirit means a distilled spirit that has not been in distribution in the state for at least the past 5 years.
Yeah.
So yes, it's arguably going to be a workaround, but the goal appears to be to go after distilled spirits that just aren't made anymore, like Carmen said. However, what I'll do is talk to Senator Reed and see what I can find out in more detail about the intent of the bill.
Yeah, because your regular liquor license, even like in Watertown, is over $100,000.
Yeah.
And there's only so many available, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to mention one thing that just got added. HCR 6008. This is coming from, I think it's Carl Perry. No, Tim Goodwin in the Black Hills. Senator Perry's the prime sponsor in the Senate. This bill is supporting bringing Amtrak passenger rail service to South Dakota. TCSD has decided to support this bill or this resolution. Now, resolutions don't have any force of law, but the LART viewed this as a way that we could, as TCSD, support one more way of bringing tourists to the state of South Dakota. Currently, it's my understanding there's no Amtrak service, passenger service in this state. Is that correct? Yep. So, I mean, it proposed network of preferred routes would connect Denver and Minneapolis, St. Paul, by means of a route that would pass through Rapid City, Pier, and Sioux Falls. Again, no force of law. It's just basically saying, hey, we, the legislature of the state of South Dakota, would like you, federal government, and Amtrak to consider bringing passenger rail service back to this state. Any other questions or comments on anything we've talked about or didn't talk about?
I just was curious what the feedback is on the cultural center completed construction, renovation, and pier, and then the other museum exhibits grant. What the feedback is on that from the legislature?
I have not heard anything from the members of the legislature on those items.
I don't remember what the House bill is, but it passed unanimously. And then it went through education, and then it got routed to appropriations, joint appropriations. And then the hearing was last week on it, and it passed unanimously from there. And I haven't looked, there was a couple amendments to clean it up, but they were pretty straightforward amendments, if I remember correctly. I don't know where it is with the granting out to other museums, Rosie. I don't remember that. I would have to look at it again. But so far, it seems like it's kind of just moving through.
Is this House Bill 1042?
Sounds like it. Yeah, that sounds right.
Making appropriation for historical exhibits. So the amendment that was made courtesy of Representative Derby struck out the second half of the money. So it's now no longer a total of 3 million. It's simply 1.5 to the Department of Education for modernizing exhibits of the Cultural Heritage Center. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm misreading it. The other 1.5 is in there. The state treasurer's transfer 1.5 from the Tourism Promotion Fund to the other activities of fund within the Department of Education. So this is taking 1.5 million out of the Tourism Promotion Fund.
So those funds, I'll just speak to that for a little bit. Tourism is supportive of this because those are funds right now that they want to spend down that they don't have access to on a annual appropriations basis, I think. I don't know how to say that correctly, but they're supportive of this. And then I'll just clarify one thing on it is that it's actually for the structural part of it. It says it's exhibits, but that's the structural part of the exhibit. So they like need walls to put the exhibits on and stuff. I don't know. This is background on it. And so that part is what this is for, if I understand correctly. I've had a few discussions about this one with people in the Cultural Heritage Center that are part of the Historical Society.
Okay, it's a beautiful facility. I was just curious where everything was. Thanks for the clarification, Anne.
That's okay. And they really want to get it done. And this helps
Yeah.
them get it done in a timely fashion so they can stay on schedule with it.
I'm glad I appreciate the clarification, and the fact that the Tourism Promotion Fund is not hostile to TCSD and its members.
No, I would hope not. I was just asking for a clarification to see where that's at. So, and what the rationale. So thank you.
From the tourism's perspective, even I think it was in a hearing, I think it was the tourism briefing hearing, they stated in that hearing that this is the premier historical museum for the whole state. And so that is really important towards driving tourism into Pier and just expanding it through the area and how important historical and cultural tourism is to our state. So.
Okay. Anything else?
I have.
Justin,
Yeah.
are the two exemption bills on taxing advertising, are they gonna come up at the same time in committee meetings?
My guess is yes.
Okay.
Now, what I have heard through the grapevine from several folks is that Aaron Elward will withdraw House Bill 1138. However, I've been told that before by Representative Aylward and then had it not happen. So because 1138 and 1191 do mostly the same things, and I'm not going to get into nitpicky detail on how they're different, but my guess is that Aylward will withdraw 1138 and they'll just have 1191 move forward. Now, interestingly, Scott Odenbach, who is not the prime sponsor of 1191, but is a co-sponsor, was talked to by the Newspaper Association, who said, this is not a great bill. We're going to fight this. And he told them, wait a minute, we did not intend that bill to repeal the exemption on advertising. That bill is intended only to add a 10% tax on drug advertising. And so Dave Bordewick with the newspapers cited him chapter and verse and said, your bill repeals the entirety of the exemption on advertising. And he said, well, that was not the intent, so I need to look into that. Well, no amendment has come forward yet, but regardless, I know for a fact that Senator Randy Dybert is hog-housing Senate Bill 121 to repeal the exemption for advertising services. So this is coming from multiple quarters. They view this as an easy win to generate additional revenue. In their minds, $40 million, which we just don't think the math is there to support that. But to answer your question, Rick, yes, I think they'll bring 1138 and 1191 up for hearing at the same time, most likely Friday. The last possible date they could do it is February 24.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks? If not, let's go fight win, team.
I have a lot of emails that have to get sent out here, so yeah, all good. Well, thank you, Justin. Appreciate, the updates and everything and the hard work. I know it's been an interesting year to date, so it's gonna get crazy busy now.
Yep,
Yeah.
sorry about
Bigger.
my voice. I succumbed to some of the Capitol crud, so
It's okay. Thank you, Justin. Safe travels.
Hi, everybody.
thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.